Hey guys, it's Thermal Grease Monkey here, and I'm back once again with another episode because I have realized something. Nobody has any money. So, I decided in this episode that I was going to do something a little bit different than my other ones. Previously, my first two episodes on the channel, I've been kind of testing some other hardware, and I still plan to do that. But I decided instead to give myself a different challenge. A while back, had been asked, hey, do you think you could build a PC for $200? I know someone who wants a computer. They only got like $200. And I was thinking about it, and I went, you know what? I think I could. I think I could build a pretty decent gaming PC for $200. Now, obviously, there's going to be some compromises. $200 for any PC is not much. But I tried my absolute best to see what I could do and what parts I could put together. For starters, this is the first thing, and I'll throw up the image right here. This right here is an Asus Prime B360 motherboard with an Intel Core i5-8400 and 16 gigs of RAM. I've picked this up on Craigslist. It was listed for $55. I picked it up from the guy, basically just was upgrading his PC, didn't need the parts anymore, had other stuff, and I got a good price on it. The second thing I went to is I went to Newegg because I know they have a lot of combo deals. Now, Amazon has these. Newegg has a lot of them, though. So I searched on Newegg, and I ran across one from Zalman. Zalman has a case called the Zalman T3 Plus, and it's a really cheap case. Normally it retails for about $35 to $40, and it's not crazy build quality, but it was something that I always saw as a decent budget case that could be interesting. So I saw that, and it included a tower CPU cooler as well as a 600-watt power supply, 80 plus bronze. And although I don't know if it'll be any good, I figured, hey, I'm willing to gamble for a $200 gaming PC. I gotta gamble a little somewhere. So for $90, I ended up picking up this, and I'll throw up a picture of them, of the case, the power supply, and the CPU cooler. The third thing I was going to need was a GPU. Now, with GPU and storage being the last two things I need, a GPU really is needed. So I started looking around the $40 range to see what my options were. A lot of the ones I saw were GTX 9 series, a lot of like GTX 950s, 960s, GTX 1050s. The ones that were more interesting were like the GTX 970s, the 1050 Ti's, RX 470s, stuff like that. But definitely those cards, it was a lot more budget oriented, and all the cards that were available were going to be 4 gig cards. The 470 with 8 gigs of VRAM, people were asking at least 50 to 60, and obviously we don't have the budget for that. So I did a little bit of searching around, and eventually I saw these 4 gig RX 480s. Now, a lot of people, when the RX 480 came out, everybody wanted the 8 gig, and it was the smarter decision, and even to this day, if you're gaming on a 480 or 580, the 8 gig VRAM card is the much smarter option. Same thing with an RX 470 or 570. More VRAM is needed nowadays. But the 4 gig cards are a really interesting one. You can get them for a really good price, and for a 4 gig 480, I was shocked to see how cheap they were. So I ended up picking up this, I'll throw up a picture right here, this MSI Armor RX 480 with 4 gigs of VRAM. And I thought this was a steal. $37, free shipping, says the card works, perfect. My last thing I had was the storage. And with $13, give or take, obviously I have to account for tax and shipping and stuff. I didn't account for it on this, so it is a little over $200. But I needed a storage drive, so I ended up picking up this, and I'll throw up a picture right here of this Patriot P310 M.2 drive. 240 gigabytes, which is not really anything. It can hold a game, maybe two, and you'll see very quickly there's not a lot of storage. But I needed a drive, I needed something fast and snappy, and an M.2 costs about the same as an SSD. So I ended up picking up this. It's PCIe 3.0, which is perfect for our system. And I started putting it together and benchmarking games. Except that I didn't. I was able to install Windows, and I was able to download the games. And as soon as I started benchmarking stuff, I quickly realized when my games were crashing and the computer was crashing, something's wrong. My first thought when the computer was crashing was, oh crap, the power supply doesn't work, it sucks, it's a problem, right? And I started doing my general diagnostic stuff. I eventually decided to unplug the GPU, because that's usually the biggest power draw. And I ran the system and it didn't crash at all. And I thought, interesting. So I plugged the GPU back in and it crashed again. And I started to notice something. As I started benchmarking the first game, which was Rocket League, I noticed the FPS was really high and then it would just drop off after a few minutes in. Eventually, I took a look at the GPU, touched it, and it was burning hot. They normally run hot, but it was melting things hot, cooking temperatures hot. So I ended up checking, and our little buddy here, the fans didn't spin. So I thought, hey, maybe the fans don't work. And then my dad gave me the idea, hey, have you checked the fan header on the board? Maybe the fan header's broken. So we ended up undoing the little fan header right here and putting a little voltage meter to it. And we had basically no voltage coming through. Little to basically none. And so the fans, they weren't spinning. And for the RX 480, it's not a very powerful card in modern day standards, but this thing is a pretty hot running card if you don't have any airflow running to it. And spoiler, the case does come with 2 fans, an intake and an exhaust, but it's not nearly enough for the whole system. So very quickly, this became an issue. Now I had 2 options. I could either A, rip all of this off, and I could zip tie 2 case fans and plug it into the motherboard and do all that, and I was really tempted to do that. But I thought of, hey, maybe this would be a good opportunity for somebody who would run into the same problem. Can I repeat the same thing? And I ended up getting this. I have this picture right here. Now, this is me after I fixed it. The graphics card came in 2 pieces. The PCB with the cooler on it and the plastic shroud with the fan attached to it were separated. Now, they were still together because of the cable for the fan plugging into the board, but they were separated. So I ended up zip tying it together, and here's the picture that we have. Now, I'm going to kind of throw up some footage and metrics and stuff right here for the testing. And we ended up only playing 3 games because that's all the storage we had. For starters, we started with Rocket League. Now, Rocket League was the one that kept having issues and the frame rate was dropping on the previous card, but that the new one was able to handle because it had a cooling system for it. So we were averaging about 436 FPS, and I put all of it to the lowest graphics settings just to see what it's like, what's the max FPS that we can get, and our minimums were all the way down to 128. It was so smooth, though, that it didn't matter the averages to the lows, unless you're a big stickler and you're really pixel peaking and every single little bit matters. You could not tell the difference. It was a super smooth experience overall, and I really enjoyed it. Obviously, you can turn up the graphics. It's not going to be a big deal. I did put it on the highest graphics, and we were averaging about where our minimums were in the 100 to 200 FPS range. So it is a really easy game to run. That's how Rocket League was designed, and so obviously this PC is going to be able to play it. The second game we played was Fortnite. Now for Fortnite, I just mostly ran it in performance mode. I did a little bit of testing, not official, tracking numbers and stuff like that. But I ran it in performance mode because it's going to give the best case scenario for this PC. Obviously, you can turn up the graphics and it will be able to handle on low, medium graphics. It'll be able to handle, be in the 60 FPS range and give you a pretty smooth experience. But for your averages, it was averaging about 190 FPS with the minimums being 102. And the averages, I noticed occasionally from the drop into the low 100 range, it was generally somewhere between 180 to 210 FPS. So a really smooth experience. And so much so, I honestly stopped tracking the FPS and I started just playing the game and having fun. And for our third game, now I initially was going to test CS2, but I ended up testing Valorant, and it's because of one simple thing. We didn't have enough storage. I found out CS2 is 56 or 54 gigabytes, and Valorant was only 48. Now that, I believe it was 54 gigabytes for CS2 and 48 for Valorant, that 6 gigabytes made a big difference. If you're installing like Fortnite and Rocket League, and then you install something like a Valorant or a CS, it all takes up space and it adds up really quickly. Even if you're playing games that take up less storage, you still run out of room really quickly. 240 gigs, it's not a lot of storage, and I understand that, but for 200 bucks, you're gonna have to give up something somewhere. Regardless, in Valorant, it was a really nice, smooth experience, and I'll throw up the footage right now. We were averaging about 270 FPS with minimums at 217. And I just threw everything at low just to give it its best case scenario. I did test it at high as well, and you're in the low 200 to high 100 range for your FPS. It, swings around there. And overall, it's still a really smooth experience. I have nothing to really complain about. And for this specific system, if you're planning on playing more budget games, esports titles, stuff like that, playing on low FPS, it's a great experience. So overall, would I say this was a great experience? I thought it was pretty good. For me personally, if I was getting into PC gaming and I wanted something cheap and budget, I thought it did a really good job. The deal I got for the CPU, motherboard, and RAM, I think would be a really hard to duplicate. So I suspect likely you can find a CPU and motherboard combo for a similar price. The RAM was just something that I also got thrown in. So if you can, great. But obviously, for RAM, you might have to account in another 20 or so bucks to find a used 16 gig kit of RAM that works. So keep that in mind. The Newegg combo for the case, the power supply, and the cooler, I was pleasantly surprised. The case, I think, it's cheaply made. It's not anything crazy, but it's still a decent looking case. You get an intake and an exhaust fan though, which is really nice and helpful. And I was actually really surprised about the CPU cooler. In the advertising, it showed 2 heat pipes, and there were actually 3. And it's a small little tower cooler, and there's a lot of other ones you could get comparably, but it's a solid choice. And then as far as the power supply goes, now I don't have a full way to test the system. I mean, you can probably tell by my room that I don't have a power supply tester, and I don't really have a good way to test it. But the initial testing of it didn't arrive dead, and it didn't die or kill any of my components while it was working. I feel as though if you're making a budget system, something that's not pulling a lot of wattage, it's maybe a couple hundred watts for this 600 watt 80 plus bronze system that it claims. From what I can tell, if you're only pulling a couple hundred watts, you're gonna be fine. The GPU choice, it's a tough one. At this price point, you really don't have a lot of good options. Like I said earlier in the video, you got, on the NVIDIA side of things, you got the GTX 950, the 960, the 1050 Ti, the 970. Those are ones you can kind of find. On the AMD side of things, your RX 470, 570, and your 4 gig RX 480s and 580s. That's mostly what you're looking at. You're not going to be getting any of the 8 gig 470s, 480s, 570s, 580s. People tend to ask for 50 or 60 bucks for those at least. And there is a notable difference between the 4 and the 8 gig. There is for sure. You're going to have a tough time finding a GPU that's not 4 gigs or less. So if you're doing a $200 system, you have to temper your expectations. And also, if you're able to get parts from people, if they give it to you or donate, or you find a good deal, jump on it. Thank you guys though for watching. I hope you guys appreciate the video. I wanted to do something a little bit different. I'd kind of thought about doing a $200 gaming PC for a while. I do have some other kind of PC ideas like this kind of in the works. Doing some research, trying to find different parts and stuff. So I have other videos like this planned out as well as my usual benchmarking of kind of older components and systems and just seeing how they still hold up in 2025. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Please leave a like if you guys enjoyed. If you didn't, feel free to leave a dislike. Totally fine. If you guys are enjoying my content, if you guys could hit that subscribe button, it'd be really appreciated. And if you guys can leave a comment. I always enjoy seeing people's comments, and when people leave stuff of their own experiences that I can kind of read, and maybe it gives me an idea or ideas that you guys have for me to do. So I hope you guys enjoyed though, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, guys.